economics, but I first wanted to see if we can talk a little bit about, insofar as you're willing, about the Story of Stuff film. We had to leave the second it was over, but I'm wondering what you thought of it. When I show you these little clips, or even the longer films, by the way, I want you to understand clearly that I'm not showing it to you as dogma. I'm showing it to you because I want you to make up your mind about these things. Annie Leonard, that's a little bit of a dated video, but she has several. She has a podcast, and I don't always agree with her. For example, if you watch her cap and trade video, completely disagree with her. So I want you to watch these with a critical eye and to sort of think about them in the context of your life. But does anyone want to volunteer? Do some people want to volunteer what they thought of this? Is this stuff you knew? The system of production, distribution, consumption, and disposal? Did you know this? And how did you frame it in the context of your life? Is that too long of a question? Yeah.
I thought it was crazy how we throw away 99% of stuff we use, and within like 6 months too. And then like producers like pretty much made like within 6 months instead of like 5 months.
It is. It's insane, right? And the sort of contrived nature of it. And it's true, you go to get a mop or something. I don't know how many of you have bought mops recently, but right, they're all plastic with the sponge badly glued on, and barbecues, everything. So I thought of this summer. I live in a condo, and my downstairs neighbors and I've got our hot water heaters. In 2005, they're rated and ranked and or whatever, not insured, what do you call it? Guaranteed for 10 years. They both failed on the same day in 2015, this summer, on the same day, two hot water heaters. And it was crazy, because there was water in the basement. I was like, oh, it's just left over from when my neighbor redid her hot water heater. Nope, mine was leaking. Insane. And they said, there's nothing you can do, just got to throw it away and get a new one. Crazy. You think they'd be able to make them better? Anyone else? Yeah?
I think the concepts of perceived and planned obsolescence are really interesting, because perceived you can kind of be content with what you have, but like if your fridge breaks, you need the fridge, so you have less control over that.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And the media, right? The role the media plays in the whole "you suck" thing. It's a bit of a crass phrase, but it's true, right? The fat heel, skinny heel year. There's nothing wrong with the height of your jeans, right? Where they hit your waist, or the height of your shirt where it goes down. But if you wear a shirt that comes up to here now, oh God, you must have bought that 5 years ago. And so you can't wear that anymore. So right, this perceived obsolescence. You're wearing something that's out of date, and people will know you have not contributed to the golden era of consumption. So anyone else? Yeah? Yeah, right, so good. So huge amounts of waste, and we'll continue on that theme today. We have a one-way throughput of largely finite resources, and our economy grows the more quickly we do that, but the environment suffers the more quickly we do that. Nothing preserves an environment like poverty, and nothing ruins an environment like affluence. And so you're right, there's resources, and then also the human misery. When we look at minerals and mining, we'll look at, she mentioned the people in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the massive scale of human misery that goes on there as a result of the fact that they have coltan, they have tantalum, they have tin, they have tungsten, they have gold. We need those for our cheap electronics, right? How many of you have had your cell phone for 5 years? One person? 4 years? And what did you do with the ones that you had last time? Throw it away? Still have it back up in case you lose this one? What did you do with the one before that? Where did they go? We'll talk about that too. So you have these people, systematic rape and torture go on at virtually all of the women in the Democratic Republic of Congo to subjugate these people and keep them in the mines. And so you have human misery on an unprecedented scale there, and UN peacekeeping efforts have largely failed there. You don't hear about it, right? And then on the other hand, when you throw away your phone, it goes to places like China, it goes to developing and industrializing nations where there are children and women who actually burn the cell phone to get the plastic off of it, these mixed components, So they burn the material to get the plastic off, and then they have to hand sort. These people who are so poor, making $1 to $3 per week, hand sort the different metals to try to then sell them to make a living. And they have astronomical levels of lead, of cadmium, of nickel, of mercury in their blood. They're breathing in all sorts of organics from the burning of plastic without any respiration. So we live in our society largely on the backs of others in a really horrible way, and on the backs of the environment. And this, I think it's really powerful where she shrunk down that whole thing to show all we see is that golden arrow of consumption. That's all we see. How much did you buy lately? And that shows how much value you have in our society. So should you feel bad about that? Should you watch that and go home and kick yourself and feel horrible?
I don't think there's necessarily like anything wrong with a culture that consumes. I just think that we should more feel guilty about the things she was saying about how we don't dispose of things properly, and like just because things start in their like metaphorical life, we don't take care of it when they die. Like we just sort of throw them off when like there are actual ways to dispose of things properly. I think that like it would be easier for our culture to adapt to the idea that we can dispose of things instead of consume less.
Yeah, absolutely. That's intrinsic to the whole concept of sustainability, right? I'm trying to paint this picture for you so that you'll be interested in the stuff that we talk about going forward, but you're right. I don't like when environmental people try to make you feel guilty, right? Standing on the corner, do you have some time to care about the environment? And you're the devil if you don't sit and give them money and listen to them. That's not how you're supposed to do it, or that's not necessarily the most effective way of doing it, I should say. So we don't want to lower our standard of living, right? And that is not something that I don't think you should feel bad about. What we should feel bad about is when we don't recycle, when we don't do things that don't appreciably lower your standard of living, but will help future generations to have what we have, right? Instead of throwing away the whole computer, fix that chip. We're getting better about those things. So yeah, when I show you some agricultural little short video clips, they talk about greedy, horrible agro-industry. There is no moral code really inherent in capitalism, which is what we'll talk about today, right? It's simply providing goods for the smallest amount of money so that your company can thrive. And if you don't do that, your company goes out of business. And people who do this environmental sustainability and talk about how great and environmentally friendly their companies are, I would say that's, a marketing ploy more than anything. So we'll talk about how perhaps you shouldn't feel badly about this stuff. Yes, there are things you can do that include lowering your consumption of meat and thinking before you buy these things. Do you need this? Or is it because you saw it on TV that you suck if you don't have it? And then also making sure that you vote for the right people and figuring out where your money goes. So anyone else want to say anything about the film? Did you like it overall? Is it stuff that you already knew? Or was this new stuff for you? Anyone? Did you learn something? Raise your hand if you did not learn anything. Okay, good. All right. So it is a little dated, as I said, but it's still quite relevant. So let's now look at this. Let me turn on the lights that we like. That's good? Yeah? Does I see hands up? No? Okay. That's not my glasses. Here are my glasses. And we will start to talk about economics. Again, this is a science course, but this is a course on how humans are impacting the environment. And we are impacting the environment because of economics and population. So we'll look at economics. Apologies to those of you who are econ majors who know all of this stuff already, but I hope I'll frame it in the context of economics. We'll also look at politics over today and next Wednesday, and we will look at sustainability and some sorts of environmental movement, what sorts of things people have done. So first, and also I put this presentation and yesterday's and the first day's presentation on Canvas. It's under files, and so you have those now. Make sure that, or send me an email to someone, all of you, if you can't see it, because I had problems in the other class. I just put it on, so it might take a couple minutes, but that, this isn't the one I wanted. I guess it is. Put that on. Yeah, all right, that's good enough. I was hoping people would answer this. So I'll not put it up yet. What is our economy? How would you describe our economy? You don't have to come up with a perfect description. Oh, the economy is growing. Oh no, the economy is suffering. Oh no, we're in a recession. What is our economy? What is an economy? Yeah.
Buying and selling goods and services.
Excellent, excellent. Yes. Are you an econ major? Oh, okay. You're just smart. No, I'm just a BC student. So the economy is a system by which we buy and sell goods and services. So again, nothing magical about what I've written here, but it's a system of producing, distributing, consuming, and importantly, Annie Leonard puts in disposing, right? So you could add that. We'll look at waste, solid and hazardous waste. There's a lot of money to be made, and there's a lot of money spent on hazardous waste and solid waste. So it's a system by which we produce, consume, distribute, consume, and dispose of things. Let's look at this in the environmental realm. One more definition, the system of producing, distributing, consuming, and disposing of what? Of goods. And we looked at goods yesterday. Anything that satisfies people's needs and wants. Anything you can buy. From the house cleaner that you hire to clean your house, to the shirt you're wearing, to your pens, your laptops, anything that you buy or pay money to have done is an economic good. So we're tracking in our economy the system by which we do these things. What is our economic system in this country? Kind of a trick question. Yep. Excellent. Thank you. Yes. We are a capitalist society. Is that all that's on there? Yeah, okay. It's also called free market or pure market capitalism. It is a system in which economic decisions are made in markets. Buyers and sellers interact freely, and they interact without any sort of government or other intervention. So that's pure capitalism. Pure capitalism exists only in theory, though. There's no country that practices pure capitalism. Why not? Markets can fail, right? Good. And what else? What about the environment? Yeah?
The moral implications of not having any regulations.
The moral implications, good. The moral, the environmental, the humanitarian implications of not having any environmental or any regulation. What does the government do in our society? Started to see that yesterday. What is the government's job, simply put? Yeah?
Just to regulate goods and services themselves.
Good, yeah. And what else?
Stimulate spending.
Stimulate spending, good.
Tax.
To what?
Tax.
Tax. They tax us, so what do they do with that tax money, ideally? What did Annie Leonard say when she was doing the little, yeah?
You put them back into the social services like health education.
Good, so we're all, good, excellent. Everything that people have said is right. We're all dancing around these two words that she said, to protect us. Government's job is to protect us. How did you get here today? Someone, how did you get here? If you live off campus especially. Bus, okay. So good. Where did the bus, on what surface did the bus drive? On the roads. And who built the roads? What? Government. And what would happen if we had pure capitalist society? Would the road be there? Exactly. It might not. Someone shook her head, no, that's right. It might not be there, or it might be there but privatized. So the bus, which is a private company, has to pay a toll to get on the road, right? So now your money is adding up. People who can't afford it don't get to get around, sidewalks, things like that. What happens if somebody conked you on the head on the bus that you got here on and took your wallet in a pure capitalist society? Would you call? Can't call the police. If you find the perpetrator, you can't bring that person to court. Maybe you call a private security firm who goes and finds a person. But what's the recourse? You see where I'm getting, right? Those of you who went to public school, that's paid for by the government. So the government's job is to protect us and to impart this sort of moral code into the capitalist society. With regards to the environment, if you have businesses interacting without any intervention, businesses and consumers, without any intervention from the government, what would happen to the environment? What incentive does the business have to clean the environment or to protect it, prevent pollution from going in? None, right? So this exists only in theory. We wouldn't have all of the things that protect people in a pure capitalist society. This is a picture of what happens in a pure capitalist society. You have simply people that live in the households, and the people go to work in businesses. So this is the orange arrow is the flow of factors of production. People go to work in businesses, and they get paid for their work. And then on the upper half of this, you have households spending money in businesses and bringing products into their house. So this really, kind of simply put, is how capitalism works without any intervention. People go to work, get paid. People buy things from the businesses. And there is a flaw in this that we'll see. What's the other end of the spectrum? If you're not a capitalist society, what are you? Socialist, right, or pure command. And in this case, economic decisions are made by the government. The government decides who makes stuff, who gets to buy it, how much they get to buy, and how much they get paid for what they do. So there are and have been examples of pure socialist government, but we're really more talking about a continuum here where you have capitalism on one extreme, socialism on the other extreme, and in reality most countries fall somewhere in between. The government gets to decide more or less what happens. We tend more towards capitalism. Other places tend more towards socialism or pure command. Is there a system, capitalism versus socialism, that's better for the environment? Yes.
It's usually more efficient, but it's not necessarily better.
Good, excellent, yeah. So China, for example, right, they tend more towards pure command. China's government found out in the 80s that lead is bad for human health. Overnight, in a single stroke, they banned lead in gasoline. It was an additive to gasoline. So if you're a gas station, you had to take out all of the gas from your gas station, remove the lead, and put it back in. So the government is capable of making very broad, sweeping, and immediate decisions to protect the environment and protect people's health. But if you are in a more capitalist society, we took, 30 years to phase out lead, or 20 years to phase out lead, because there was so much pushback from the lobbying industry of the oil and gas industries. So you can't really say that one is better or worse for the environment. But most systems are mixed. The more pure command, North Korea, China, the more pure capitalist, Canada, United States, right? And so they fall, all of these countries fall somewhere between capitalism and socialism or communism. The flaw, regardless of where you fall on that spectrum, is that economic systems don't consider the environment. None of them do. And this is a concept that Annie Leonard introduced. Let me turn this down a little. Introduced last time. That's too low. So this is what environmental economists have come up with. Conceptually, it's very easy to understand. In reality, it's quite difficult to implement. So in this orange bar here, you have the economic system, whichever it is, on the continuum, extremes, whatever. You have a system of production and consumption. If you take a step back, remember we are largely in the grip of non-renewable resources. So the input into your economic system comes from Earth. whether it is a renewable, non-renewable, or potentially renewable resource. We talked about those yesterday. That is the raw material for our economic system. And the product of our economic system is the fact that we're depleting non-renewable resources, we are degrading renewable and potentially renewable resources, and we are polluting everything. So this is the flaw in economics, right? People measure just that bar and say, yay, the economy's doing really well. Really bad for the environment. They're at odds. Our economic systems do not take into account that the economy exists within the ecosphere. Virtually all economies seek economic growth. But the more you grow your economy, the faster you go through that one-way throughput. What is the economic growth? How's it measured? How do we measure economic growth? Yeah?
Usually by output.
Good. And what are the indices? Yeah?
GDP.
Yeah, excellent. GDP, GNP, right? So we seek economic growth. Economic growth is defined as the increase in the ability to produce these goods and to stream things, raw materials, through the system. So economists are yay, yay, yay when the economy grows, while environmental scientists are wringing their hands. So economic growth is an increase in capacity to provide goods and services measured by GDP, GNP. What is the definition of one or both of those? Yep.
Gross domestic product.
Yep. And what does it mean?
Just the potential to keep growing on the frontier while expanding resources and producing more goods and services.
Good. And how do we measure it? Excellent. It's a dollar value. It's the sum total of all goods and services produced in that country. So if you're talking about U.S. GDP, it's the sum total of all the money that got made by selling goods and services. GNP is slightly different. Gross national product. That includes everything within a country's borders, but also if they have companies elsewhere in other countries that contribute to the bottom line of the United States companies, then that's gross national product. So if we have an American company that has a factory in Mexico or somewhere else, and the bottom line goes to that American company, that counts as our GNP, perhaps a more accurate reflection of a country's wealth. So we have GDP and GNP. They were developed decades ago. The limits to them, I think that is it. Yeah, okay. The limits to them is that they don't include the fact that the system is going on within the ecosphere. So they hide any sort of good behavior, and they don't account for any sort of bad behavior. And you can include social justice, economic justice in this situation. So they don't reward the good guys, and they don't penalize the bad guys. But it's sort of conflicting with what I said before, because there's no good and bad here. It's just how successful you are at going through your business model, right? So there's the limit when we're talking about the environment. There was an economist, a group of economists who did this, who sort of grouped in the environmental effects and other effects. And this is what they came up with. They came up with something called a genuine progress indicator and argue that this is what we should do. So the genuine progress indicator includes environmental degradation, negative health impacts, unfair distribution, etc., unfair labor practices. And what you see through 2000 is that this is dollars per person, and it's adjusted for inflation. If you use GDP, our economy in the United States is growing, right? We had some slumps and it grows. But if you use GPI, and if you continue this line on to 2010, it's going down. We peaked in about 1962 with regard to a true indicator of our economic system in this country. We've been on the decline since way before you were born, because we are using the environment and materials and resources at an unsustainable rate. And this will catch up with us. So I hope this is giving you a little bit of a clearer picture on why should we care about the environment? This is not good news economically. So Annie Leonard talked about internalizing external costs. What is an internal cost? You're going to buy a car, and the car is $22,000. What goes into that $22,000? What are you paying for? Yeah?
Labor and materials.
Good. Materials, labor, right? The rubber for the tires, the upholstery, the labor of people putting it together. You might also be paying for the marketing, right? So you can see it on TV that you suck because you don't buy this Toyota or whatever you bought, right? So those are the internal costs, the direct cost paid by the consumer of that car. What is an external cost? What's an example of an external cost of a car?
So when like consuming the car or producing it produces the cost on a third party, so like the pollution from the car would
Excellent.
later come a cost for other people and like the air quality.
Excellent, right. So you have a car company and you are producing pollution in the process, and when you put that out into the environment, it harms everyone. And there's a dollar value that you can put on this. People with asthma, how much it costs to treat them. People who are not able to work, and so the company for which they work, for whom they work, suffers. Right. Cutting down rubber trees to make the tires, the gasoline that will go into the car when you go to drive it off the lot. That is a non-renewable resource. Maybe the company exports the manufacturing plant to Mexico, where there are more lax regulations, both in terms of people working and in terms of environment. So now we can pay people less. We don't have to give them any sort of health care, and we can get the car for cheaper, pass those savings on to the consumer, and you win, right? More people buy your car. Your decisions largely are based on what is cheaper, right? For the same quality. You don't necessarily want to buy a cheap product, but if two things are the same, then you go for the cheaper one. This is a huge problem when we get to agriculture, and I won't revisit this, so I hope you remember it. So say you are producing a car, you've exported your plant to Mexico, you're paying people an unsustainable wage, you are pouring unmitigated pollution into the air, the water, the soil, and you are using non-renewable resources in an unmitigated sense down there. You bring your car to the United States, and it's in a showroom. Now somebody else, Yuki, decides she likes the environment and she's going to do car manufacturing the right way. And so Yuki buys sustainably grown rubber, and she's using all she's using all alternative energy to make the car. She makes sure there's no highly polluting things going into the water, the air, the soil. She pays workers a sustainable wage, because remember, poor people can't care for the environment. So she gives them retirement and medical and dental, and she has a daycare on site, and she is doing everything she can to make sure that the car is produced in a very environmentally friendly way, which is what we want, right? Under our system of economics, Yuki's car might cost $200,000, and that's not an exaggeration. And the other car is $22,000. You guys get out of school, your first job is making $50,000 a year, and you have to pay rent and buy food. Which car are you going to buy if they are quality-wise exactly the same? How many are going to buy Yuki's car? $200,000. So what happens to Yuki's business? Folds, right? She goes out of business. Should you be blamed because you're not paying $200,000 for a $22,000 car? What can we do to make more of you buy her car? Excellent. Take the company that's making the $22,000 car, start taxing. Oh, I see you're using rubber unsustainably. Oh, I see you're polluting like crazy, even though it's not our country. We're going to start taxing you. Oh, I see that you're paying workers unsustainable wage. We're going to tax you. And then the company has to pass that tax on to the car buyers, the price goes up. What do you do with that tax money? Oh, Yuki, I see that you're paying your workers a lot and they can care for themselves, so we don't have to have social programs, so we're going to give you a credit. Oh, I see you're not polluting the air and the water, so that the government, the EPA, the DEP, doesn't have to come in and clean up after you. We're going to give you a credit. And when the costs go like this, the tipping point, when Yuki's car costs, and the prices will rise, I'm not going to lie and say that it's an equal exchange, costs $29,000 and the bad car costs $30,000 or $35,000, then what happens? You see what I'm saying? Environmental problems are simply an economic construct. There are no such thing as environmental problems. We have an economic problem. Another example from agriculture, my daughter was in daycare when I was at Northeastern, and they had her bake Play-Doh. They were making Play-Doh. And so she was a little leader, so she got to make Play-Doh that day. And the daycare woman said to her, you know how like when you bake with mommy? She looked up blankly. No, I don't bake. So I thought, oh God, what a bad mother I am. I've never baked with my daughter. So I said, we're gonna bake an apple cake. And so I went to the store, bought the stuff to make the apple cake. And I went to the butter. It's terrible, usually I have food delivery, whatever. So I don't shop. So I went to the store, I got butter. And I saw organic butter and regular butter next to each other. Guess the costs. A pound of regular butter was $1.99. The organic butter, I still remember this, $7.99. I threw a fit in the store. What the heck is going on here? So I couldn't believe it. Because the thing is, the $1.99 butter is horrible. It's horrible for the animals, as we'll see. It's horrible for our health. It's horrible for the environment first and foremost, I would say. Organic butter is better for your health, it's better for the animals, and much, much, much better for the environment. But now you have people going in to bake their apple cake, and they have to decide between their pocketbook and the health of the environment, and the health of their children, and the health of the animals from which the butter comes. So are they bad people for buying the regular butter? I have the luxury of buying the $7.99 butter and complaining about it for the next 2 years. But you shouldn't feel bad if you can't afford to buy the thing that's right for the environment. The reason one is so much cheaper is because there are colossal agricultural subsidies that go into doing the wrong thing from a food point of view in this country. They're gargantuan. So it's an artificial construct that those prices are different. So you see where we're going. Same thing with the oil and gas industry. I teach right after this a course called Alternative Energy. Why aren't we there yet? And these poor students have to go through a whole semester before I tell them the punchline, which is because oil and gas costs 2 to 3 cents per kilowatt hour, and everything else costs between 16 and 30 cents per kilowatt hour. And that's not the true cost. The true cost would be the other way around, except for we have giant subsidies that you're paying for in your tax dollars, your parents are paying for in their tax dollars to do the wrong thing. So very, very, very tough. So internal and external costs, we already went over that. External costs are the things that happen to the environment, non-renewable resource use, minerals and energy resources, destroying habitat, reducing biodiversity, producing solid and hazardous waste that you don't have to pay for when you buy the car. So what we should do is simple. That picture that I showed you. All we have to do is internalize the external costs. That's all we have to do. Take the external costs, put them into the cost of a product, and the environment will take care of itself. We don't even have to be here in this class. It does require government intervention, but we have a government, right? It does require government intervention, but it can be done. And in theory, it's quite easy, right? In reality, though, here's something that I did. I was mean one year. I think this is at Northeastern. I was tired. I was so tired. And I texted my TA before coming into class. I was like, Tommy, I'm so tired. And so he was so lovely. He came in, and he brought, if I drink coffee, because I'm a tea drinker, if I drink coffee, there's a problem. So he came in, and he brought this huge styrofoam cup of Dunkin' Donuts, sun-grown, industrially produced black coffee, and I was so happy. I smiled, then I looked out at the sea of environmental science faces and thought, there are so many ways that this is horrible. Styrofoam, we'll talk about all the things that go into coffee. So I decided to turn it into a learning experience, and I said it's directly relevant to this. As I'm drinking this coffee, I said to the class, 280 students, this is your homework exercise. So we had just talked about economics. I said, go home, and this coffee, Tommy, how much did this coffee cost? And he said, $2. So I said, this coffee cost $2 that somebody served Tommy to bring to me. Go home and figure out the true cost. Internalize the externalities of this coffee cup. From the styrofoam destroying ozone, from all of the fossil fuel use that's used, the sun-grown coffee destruction of the rainforest, and we went over the things sort of in the class. And I said, bring it back as extra credit for tomorrow, and we'll discuss it. And all night long, I got panicked emails. I can't figure out, all these emails, freaking out about the exercise. But what about? And after a certain point, I just said, I started typing back, do the best you can, because every student was writing me. It felt like 7 times. And so then everyone came in the next day, and they were turning in their homework extra credit, and their hands are shaking, and they're sort of hoping that I don't associate their face with the name that's on this thing. They're putting their papers down and running. And so I took them home, and the next day I came, and I had compiled the end members and what happened in between, and I wrote it on the board. The low cost, take a guess. What was the low estimate of someone, the lowest in the class? About $2. So in that case, that person thought, the true cost more or less reflected in the cost of the coffee. Anyone want to take a guess at the high number for a cup of coffee? I bet you won't get it. $8 million. Now you can laugh, and of course that's laughable, but it does pass the straight face test when you think about what goes into trying to internalize externalities. What that tells you is that that person valued an acre of rainforest that will never come back because you grew sun-grown coffee on it and used all sorts of agrochemicals. What that tells you is that the person valued the fact that there's global climate change in many steps along that way. The person that wrote $8 million values these things more than the person that wrote anything else in the class. And the answer, so they are all waiting, but what's the right answer? And there is no right answer. That's the problem with internalizing externalities. Who gets to say how much an acre of rainforest costs? Who gets to say how much it costs to cause climate change and have the polar bears be swimming farther for their food? Who gets to put a price on that? And if you do that globally, how do you do that? Right? So internalizing external costs, very easy in theory, very, very, very difficult in reality, because how do we do this? But it's not an exercise in futility, because there is a way that we can work within economic systems to solve environmental problems. And many people, including myself, say this is the answer, not standing on a street corner asking people if they have time to care about the environment and making people feel bad if they don't shell out a bunch of money. We have to work within the economic system to protect or preserve the environment. Here's an example. I'm going to show you this graph, but 3 times. First, there's a company making something. This is where the government comes in. What you have on the y-axis is the cost per unit of pollution, and there are different pollutants being produced, so you apply it to each specific type. And on the x-axis is the percent of pollutants removed. What does this graph tell you? Someone describe it in words. Yeah? Excellent. That's simple. The more pollutants you remove, the more expensive it is. If you don't remove anything, it doesn't cost anything. And if you remove it all, it's astronomically expensive. Very simple. So let me overlay a couple of lines on this, though. Now look at the green line. The green line is the cost to society, and you see it's a mirror image of the cost of cleanup. If you don't remove any pollution, it doesn't cost anything, but now it has an astronomical cost to society in health problems. If you remove it all, there's no cost to society, but you have bankrupted yourself removing that pollutant. So what economists do in the government and elsewhere is to figure out the biggest bang for the buck, which is where? Bless you. How much pollutant gives you the maximum benefit to society for the minimum amount of money? Excellent, 50%. That's what we do. We are busy producing in these factories, and the point that the government shoots for is you remove half of all the pollution that you are generating before it leaves your factory. But that means that half of it is still going into the environment all the time. Water, air, soil, everything. With a cost, a significant cost to society. So government does this. They regulate using cost-benefit analyses. They use economic incentives. They use punishments. They use taxes. And the graph shows that it costs. It costs potentially a lot to be caring for the environment. But as we ended class the first day, we said that there are a lot of poor people. The wealth gap is wide and getting wider. The richest 20% receive most of the world's income. And the benefits of economic growth have mostly flowed upwards rather than downwards. And some other statistics, 1 in 4 people on Earth live on $1 per day. Half of humanity lives on $2 per day. The poor can't clean the environment because they can't eat. They have skyrocketing birth rates. They use resources unsustainably, and they make more pollution. So for many ways, environmental economists say the best way to help the poor is by economic growth. Provides more jobs, provides more money for people so that and then taxing people to help the poor so they can help themselves, and then people can care for the environment. Environmental economists say that this can be done for $40 billion a year globally. That may sound like a lot of money, but it's 1/10 of 1% of our world economic ongoing. So again, if you make $50,000 when you get out of school per year, your share for redistributing and helping the poor to care for the environment is $50 per year. You probably can spend that in a week with coffee, right? So there are economic solutions that include forgiving international debt that help people to care for the environment. So politics, this is the crucial link. This is another place where you come in. Very simple things. This is not going to be on the test, but just so you know, you have to voice your opinions. You have to vote for the right people. Decisions are reactive in this country and elsewhere. They result from bargaining and compromise only after a catastrophe has been established. So this is a problem. We are not preventative with regards to the economy. How you can influence environmental policy, again, you're not going to be responsible for this. Voting, very important. Look at candidates' records on the environment. See what you believe in. Vote. Send opinions to elected officials. This is so easy these days. When Mayor Menino, his last term in office, I loved Mayor Menino. He's so fabulous, so fabulous. Whenever a student of mine wanted to talk to him about an environmental initiative from an environmental club or something, he would always meet with that student himself. He didn't have people. He was his people. And he really cared. He did a lot for the city of Boston with regards to making it green. Really, really great things. So we would sometimes sit in the beginning of class, a big lecture hall. What should we say to Mayor Menino today? We'd write him an email about something that we heard in the news. So it's really easy. Just do it online and hit send. And that's a powerful way to tell your elected officials that you're watching. You're educating yourselves now. You can educate other people. Go home and tell people the things you learn. If you see any waste, illegal activities, can do that. Can run for office, participate in grassroots activities. You can also get a job. And that's where if you're a major, great, you'll get a job in the environmental field. If you're a minor, there's nothing that you can't do as a major that an environmental minor wouldn't help. CJ, criminal justice, you can go into environmental law enforcement. Communications, you can go into environmental journalism or environmental communications. Adding environmental to any job title can only help you in the job market. So you don't have to become a geologist or an environmental scientist to have a flavor of that to your degree and to open doors for you that wouldn't otherwise be open. Also something you don't have to write. But this is what I think some people go through in this class as they go through and see all the problems that we talk about. Gloom and doom pessimism, I try to not foster that at all. But, oh God, we're already sunk. We're all going to die. The environment's going to just ruin us. And so there's nothing we can do. We shouldn't even bother. There's also blind technological optimism. Oh, the engineers will solve all these problems. Like techno fixes for global climate change. Spraying seawater into the atmosphere to make clouds so the sun's rays bounce off. Blind optimism. For every environmental problem, there's an engineered solution.